Now, firms do want to minimize cost, but their end goal is actually something different. Their end goal in economics is to maximize profits, okay? So let's talk about this assumption and let's talk about what profits are. So for our purposes, we're going to typically represent profit with the Greek letter pi, and we define it as basically revenues. So that's the sales of your output minus your costs. Okay? So we've seen cost, and if you have two inputs, like labor and capital, your costs are WL plus RK. What's revenue? It's the price of your output times the amount of output that you managed to sell at that price. Okay? And so profit is going to be defined almost across the board as this equation. Now, why do I say almost across the board? Well, you might have different inputs. You could be studying a problem where it's important to keep track of more than just labor and capital, and so you'd have to add the cost of those other additional inputs in. And we'll see later that the price that you charge might not just be fixed, but for now we're just going to assume it is. Okay. So, why do we assume that firms want to maximize profits? Are we saying that all business people are heartless and narrow-minded and they have no humanity in them? No, we're just saying that this is a simplifying assumption that is pretty useful, and there will be situations where it's off, and if that's the case, then use a better model. But we find most of the time thinking as though this is their goal works pretty well. So, why? Well, first off, profit to the owner expands their ability to buy stuff, so that's easy to understand why they would care about profit. But also, we'll talk about later, in an efficient market, if you're unprofitable, you can be driven out of the market, and then so only profitable firms are left. Or it could be that if you're not as profitable as you could be, other investors may engage in a hostile takeover for you. If the markets are efficient, these kind of things can happen, and they kind of just keep pushing us to the goal of maximizing profit. Now, I know that that's not how firms actually are. I always think of this conversation I had with one of my friends who's a patent lawyer, and he told me about, he was advising a client who was a business or an entrepreneur who was engaged in a lawsuit with somebody about patent infringement, and he was sort of saying, well, I recommend that you settle. It's going to take so long and it could be so costly to get this tied up and finished in court that you'll make a lot more money just settling. I was like, no, it's not about the money at all. I just hate the other guy. And so, that's why I'm suing him. And so, these kind of motivations are in there, but we sort of guess that we can't easily predict them. They don't have a systematic bias one way or the other. They kind of just wash out. And so on average, this is a good benchmark that we can make a lot of predictions for. And, all these other little factors will push us sometimes in one direction or the other. But at the end of the day, profit is a pretty big driver. Okay. So sticking with the assumption that firms want to maximize their profit, how do they do that? Let's talk about that next.